So in our introductory classes, we have 6 or more different topics that we cover for beginners or people who are new. But really, it's not just for people who are new. You can hear these basic teachings over and over again, and I think still get some value. So today we were going to talk a little bit about the Karma Kagyu lineage, which is our blessed lineage, and the holder of that lineage, as you know, is the 17th Karmapa. We have been celebrating 900 years of our lineage, and June 26th, the current Karmapa, the 17th Gyalwa Karmapa, Orgyen Trinley Dorje, celebrated his 31st birthday. So we celebrated that, and I think most of you know how that works, that before the Karmapa passes away, he leaves a letter with his senior students that tells all of the information where he can be found in his next incarnation. And the 17th Karmapa did that as well. He left it with Taisitu Rinpoche in a little brooch kind of thing and said, there may be a time when this will be useful. Didn't tell him exactly what it was, but there was a letter inside this relatively large brooch that people often wear around their neck. So there were some years that went by before Taisitu Rinpoche thought, I wonder if there's, because we didn't have the letter. He said, well, maybe I should look inside here. And that was the letter. And it gave the name of his parents, the valley where he was going to be, when it would be, and all of the necessary information. And they put together a search party and went to Tibet. And the Dalai Lama also had a vision of this place where a valley where rivers went through, and identified it in this dream. But the letter confirmed that with the very specific aspects about the name of his parents and all those other things. So the search party went and found him. His parents had no idea, but there were auspicious circumstances around his birth, as there often is. Rainbows, the sound of a conch, where the conch often is an expression of the sound of the Dharma. And he met all of the criteria that was in this letter, and they brought him back and enthroned him. And now, 31 years later, he is again teaching. And if you are familiar with his teaching, he has a lot of wisdom for a 31-year-old, and a lot of talents. If you've seen his paintings, which are incredible, he's written plays and has refined a lot of the texts that were incorrect in some kind of way. So he has been perfecting the lineage texts and the practices, and has been somewhat confined because of political things in terms of his travel. He's been to the United States on several occasions, and we'll see him again soon. He just wrapped up a European trip recently. But this is a picture of the Karmapa. And I've had the good fortune of being with him a couple months ago in India, in Bodh Gaya. We have what's called Munlam. And Munlam are prayers for peace. And people from all over the world come to Bodh Gaya, which is the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. It's one of the places of pilgrimage where he attained enlightenment, where he taught, where he passed away, Parinirvana. There are several places that are considered pilgrimage places. So Bodh Gaya is really an amazing place to walk in the footsteps of the Buddha. I was humbled to be there and had the good fortune of being there with Karmapa. So our lineage is known as the practice lineage because our emphasis is on the direct experience of the nature of your mind through practice. The 2 lineages, there are 4 lineages, as you may know, in Tibetan Buddhism. There are sub-lineages as well, but the four main lineages are the Nyingma, which is the oldest religion, or the oldest of the Buddhist lineages, the Kagyu, which is next, the Shakya, and the Gelug of the Dalai Lamas. So the Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelug tradition, and the emphasis is on study, on debate, on sutra memorization and understanding. So not that the Kagyus don't debate or study, and it's not that the Gelugs don't have intense practices, but they don't have the 3-year retreat, of which I had the good fortune of doing a 3-month retreat under the auspices of Karta Rinpoche, who's the abbot of the monastery in upstate New York, which I'll be going to next week. I'll be away for about a week. And there's a North American Munlam. There's the Asian variety that's always in Bodh Gaya, and is overseas. The Karmapa oversees that one. And this one is next week in New York, and I will be there for that, and then go to KTD. I haven't been there in a while, but KTD, Karma Triana Dharma Chakra, is the mother center for all of the KTCs, of which we are a KTC. Karma Thegsum Choling, which is Tibetan, but Karma Thegsum Choling means where the 3 yanas are taught. And the yanas we discussed briefly last week. The Hinayana, the path of the solitary realizer here, whose intention is to escape samsara and to attain nirvana. So there's a particular path. The Buddha taught many different paths actually to appeal to the different minds of beings. So the Hinayana path is called the lesser vehicle because its focus is on individual liberation. The Mahayana path, or the greater vehicle, is, or the Bodhisattva yana, is about saying, yes, there is suffering in the world, yes, I am suffering, yes, I do want to escape that suffering, but so are other human beings, other beings in general that suffer. That is samsara. That's the nature of, until one transcends and goes beyond this limitation of birth and death and reincarnation based on ignorance, based on our attachments, based on our clinging. We continually repeat this pattern, are reborn again and again, based on karmic causes and conditions. The Mahayana tradition sees this suffering and wants to remedy it through their practice. And so the Bodhisattva takes a vow that they will not attain their own liberation or nirvana until all beings attain the state of perfect awareness of the Buddha. So they work diligently to, for their own liberation, because you can only be of benefit based on your own level of realization, but with the attitude, the aspiration, and intention to benefit all sentient beings. See the difference between Hinayana and Mahayana? And the Vajrayana is requires the connection with the Guru. It is about also the Vajrayana also uses the yidam, such as Chenrezi, and imagining oneself as the yidam or as a completely liberated Buddha. By practicing these, it's kind of like you fake it till you make it. So you imagine yourself in this way, and it's also called mantrayana because we use mantras such as Om Mani Padme Hum, which is the mantra, for example, of Chenrezi. So, one of the practices we do at 12 noon on Sundays is Chenrezi practice. So this is the Bodhisattva, loving kindness and compassion, which you are. You are more this Bodhisattva than you are the person you think you are. And this helps to cultivate this awareness. And just doing the visualization, doing the mantra recitation helps to bring this, to the fore. And one begins to feel and experience and practice becoming Chenrezi. So we get away from our habitual patterns, our clinging to our anger, our jealousies, our pride, those kinds of things, and begin to practice loving kindness, compassion, generosity, patience. So we kind of have this as a catalyst and as a method, a skillful means to remove our negative qualities and to augment and cultivate our positive qualities. Does that make sense? Any particular questions about anything I've said so far? So this is the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So I was talking about this because that's in our name. The Gainesville Karma Thegsum Choling means a place where the three yanas are taught. And they're not individual. I mean, they all work together. One has to develop certain qualities in the Hinayana, the virtuous activities, cultivating discipline, cultivating meditation, cultivating wisdom through practice. And then the Mahayana attitude of loving kindness and compassion, and the practice of these different aspects of your Buddha nature, bringing them out through the Vajrayana. And yoking your mind to the Guru, or to the Yidam. Yidam is just a name that we give to these practices, such as chain raising, but there are many different ones. We're going to have a white Tara empowerment. Lama Karma is coming at the end of the month, and we'll be doing a white Tara empowerment. And for those of you who have taken refuge, we're going to be talking about the practices of Tibetan Buddhism and of our Karma Kagyu lineage. One of the first coming onto on the path is what's called taking refuge. So one takes refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, in the Sangha. So I think most of you know that, and most of you have already taken refuge. But that's really what separates a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist. They have taken refuge in what are called the three jewels. The Buddha, the historical Buddha of our time, Shakyamuni Buddha, who lived about 2,600 years ago. And the Dharma, which is the teachings, and the Sangha. Although the Buddha is no longer here, there is an unbroken lineage from the time of the Buddha to now, where this knowledge, wisdom, practice has been passed along from teacher to student in an unbroken chain. So we say that lineage is very important. So we're talking today about lineage because this energy, this transmission of practice from teacher to student is considered very important. It has to be a live, living, intact lineage from one realized master to another. So just like the lights, we use the example of electricity in a certain way, that when we turn on the light, there's a power that goes to the light and it lights up. If there's anywhere along the line where that has been broken, the light doesn't come on. Similarly, we can use that analogy with the teachings, that if there is a broken lineage, if something is done incorrectly or it's not realized, it can't be transmitted in its totality or completely enough to enlighten, wake up, or turn on the light bulb in your own mind. So we can use that analogy, and I think you kind of follow how that goes. So the Karma Kagyu lineage is the practice lineage, and we are, we do this 3-month retreat where it's just basic practice 24/7 to begin to turn the mind away from our habitual patterns of thinking and begin to cultivate virtue. We begin to have our devotion. We begin to move away from the negative actions that create negative karma. We begin to cultivate meritorious activity, and we yoke our mind with the Guru in these practices of Vajrayana. So this skillful means of practice leads to the direct experience of the nature of your mind. We'll be talking more about different aspects of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, These are words that connote or define this idea of enlightenment or realization of your own Buddha nature, which you always have had. There's nothing you can do to destroy it, tarnish it, or affect it. It is always there, but we've obscured it. It's like clouds, obscuring the sun or obscuring the moon. It is still there, but because of our past karmic predispositions, we've obscured it. The nature of our mind is still the same, always has been, always will be. There's nothing we can do to actually tarnish it or affect it, but we can ignore it. We can not see it because of these veils, it's sometimes said, or because of these clouds, or these kind of things that cover up our Buddha nature. And these practices help onion peel layer by onion peel layer to reveal our essential Buddha nature. Questions?
I wonder if you could talk about the difference in the three vessels in terms of the other two vessels, the Hinayana and the Mahayana. The role of the teacher is not as pronounced. There's no transmission as such, at least not talked about, where the student uses the Buddhist teachings to practice meditation and experience realization.
In the Mahayana there is. The teacher plays a role. There's pointing out instruction. There's all kinds of things that go with that in the Mahayana as well. On the Bodhisattva path, there's teachers can be involved in that. But you're right, in the Hinayana we call them, the solitary realizers. They don't have teachers. They hear it and then they practice it. But for us, we can hear it on YouTube, or we can read it, which is the same as hearing in a certain sense. So yes, there are different applications of teachings. So,
and there are also, I know, there are no, the realized masters in the other two traditions, there's no tradition of tulku, of conscious rebirth as an awakened being to continue to teach and guide students. So there have been great masters in the Zen and other traditions, but there's been no, at least outward, indication that these masters have incarnated consciously again. No tradition like that. Isn't that curious?
It does seem to be more in the Vajrayana tradition, but that's why we say the Buddha taught so many different ways to appeal to the different mindsets. So, in the Vajrayana, particularly in Tibet, that was cultivated, so that's true. But, and it's corroborated in sutras, and just like in the sutras, this is a time of 1,000 Buddhas of this fortunate eon. Shakyamuni Buddha was the fourth. The fifth will be Maitreya. The sixth will be Karmapa, actually, will be the sixth in this era of 1,000 Buddhas. So, but that's all in the sutra. So, I mean, in terms of tulkus, in terms of reincarnation, in terms of these things, it's there for those who have eyes to see it.
His Holiness Dalai Lama is not listed in the progression of Buddhists?
Not that I'm aware of. He may be, but we just talk about the... all of the Buddhas are listed up to Mupa, who's the last of these 1,000 Buddhas, but it could very well be, but I am not aware. Probably.
I don't think so.
Probably.
Question.
Yes.
Oh, yes, go ahead. You sure?
Sure.
This is I'm a new. What is nirvana? Or where is nirvana? What happens? What?
Yeah, nirvana is right here. But we don't see this perfected mind, again, because of our obscurations, our clinging to a sense of self. But once we, again, begin to unpeel this, or peel off these layers of subjectivity and rest naturally in our natural mind, that is, it's nothing outside of you. It's not anything that you are unfamiliar with, and sometimes you will experience this state of bliss or joy. But to live in it 24/7 and have the wisdom, omniscience, clarity, all those things that go with it, requires time in the art and practice. Again, we're creating a mental muscle. Just like, when you go to the gym, you just can't start doing 1,000 pounds. You just start where you are. Same thing with the meditation and the practices that go with it. But the goal and what your birthright and the ultimate culmination will be good for you. But that will happen as quickly or slowly as you choose. You put a little effort in, you get a little result back. You put a lot of effort in, you get a lot of result back. So that's why we do 3-year retreat, that's why we do particular practices, that's why renunciation is a part of the practice, so that one disengages from our clinging, our grasping, our wanting in our society, not so easy. We're constantly flooded with advertisements and things that, if you have this, then you'll be happy. Good luck with that. But we are hypnotized to believe that, when I have the new iPhone, then I'll be happy. Or when I have the relationship, then I'll be happy. Or when I have that job, then I'll be happy. And it's always, rarely are we in the perfection of this moment. And this is all we have. It's not somewhere down the road. That somewhere down the road doesn't even exist. It's just pure fantasy. And to reflect on the past, remorses and other kinds of things, what ifs, that's past. It's like last night's dream. So the idea is to be present, in the perfection of this moment, and use this opportunity to clarify your mind and to do the practices as we have them, and to clarify those, and to make them your own. Reading about it is one thing. Practicing and getting the wisdom that goes with that is another. So we diligently work to that end. And it doesn't mean, when I say renunciation, it doesn't mean that you have to go and live in a cave in Tibet. You could be right here, but you're not attached to the comings and goings of this ephemeral world, because you will be disappointed and you will suffer, because things are always in a state of change and flux. So the more attached you are to these things, that the degree of your attachment is the degree of your suffering. So when I say renunciation, I mean not being attached. And the first of the, when the Buddha first taught, he taught the Four Noble Truths. First noble truth is there is suffering. We don't have to look far, both in our own lives and in the world, to see suffering. And usually it's because of this clinging that we have to this ephemeral self. And the grasping. We all want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. But we're not really good at seeing what makes us happy and what makes us suffer. The important aspect of the Buddhist teaching is the law of karma and reincarnation. What will lead to happiness is cultivating virtue, and it will follow you like your shadow. Happiness will. And doing negative kinds of things is going to create suffering. So if you intentionally hurt someone, take something that doesn't belong to you, do things that are going to create this karmic seed, it is going to ripen in a particular kind of way, for good or not so good. So the idea of karma is an important consideration in the Buddhist tradition. So we have these ideas. So I was saying the first of these Four Noble Truths is there is suffering, and there's a cause of that suffering, that's the grasping, and there's a way out of suffering, and the way out of suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path, and the first of those is having the right view. We have to understand our place and what is real. So it's often said right view. I'm not really crazy about that term, right? It automatically sets the dichotomy of wrong. It's really realistic view of the nature of reality. Realistic view. And if you're clinging to a sense of self, which is illusory, changing, and essentially dreamlike, then it's going to cause trouble. So having the right view and studying the path and coming to the wisdom that goes with that is the first of those of the Eightfold Path. We have to have the right view, and that's what the Buddha taught. So there's other aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, which we will review again along the way. understanding the Four Noble Truths, the first teaching that the Buddha gave. Review it. You can go online, Google it, YouTube, Four Noble Truths, search it, and study it. You have everything you need there in terms of these practices. Question?
Yeah, this is going back to what you talked about first, but
Yeah.
do all four lineages recognize Shakyamuni Buddha as the Buddha of this age?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all based on the teachings of the Buddha. Sometimes the different teachers will emphasize a particular aspect of it because it is so vast, and their practices may differ, but they're more alike than they are different.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of these, practices that we're talking about, there may be slightly variations on a theme, but these yidams, for example, green Tara, white Tara, medicine Buddha, Guru Rinpoche, Chenrezig, these are all part of the lineages, all of them. And Ma Mudra, which is the essence of the Kagyu tradition, Dzogchen, all of them have similar kinds of explanations for this Buddha nature.
I think for many people entering this path, the challenge is the acknowledgement of unsatisfactoriness that's embedded in our world that we're living in is pretty obvious to most of us. But many people, it would seem, are drawn to this path because of the power of that unsatisfactoriness imposing itself on our lives. Often unwanted, but coming nonetheless. But I think the real challenge for many people entering the path, I know for me it has been a challenge, is the talk of happiness. We're living in a realm of desire where we seek our happiness through pleasure and comfort. And then that's been our path, the momentum of it. We're surrounded by it. Most of us are caught in it to some extent. The path to happiness in Buddhist teachings requires cultivating a stable consciousness, and that takes effort and commitment to reach a level of stability where one could access a deeper happiness that's not based on pleasure and comfort. So the initial challenge for many of us entering the path is to cultivate that stability when pleasure and comfort is still very much a dynamic that we're operating in and easy to turn to, because the happiness through Buddhist teaching is not necessarily easily tasted until that stability is cultivated.
And that's where the spiritual friend comes in. You know, you're all here because you're interested in the things we've been talking about. And the spiritual friend or the guru or the lama is someone who has traversed the path to a certain degree and understands some of the dangers, or as you say, how it can be fraught with the kind of difficulty. We think we're going to gain some happiness by this, that, or the next thing, but it's pointed out that maybe that is an incorrect view. So as one studies this, one begins to understand through right view that yes, you have to cultivate discipline. You have to have this quality, but you have to have your why. Why? Why do we do anything? So if you are dissatisfied, and we say this idea of suffering, it sounds extreme. Dukkha is the Sanskrit word, and it really means a dissatisfaction. We get the new car and then somebody keys it. We get a big old scrape and we have to go get it painted, or the car doesn't start, or we're having trouble in our relationship, or fill in the blank. But we have to see this as samsara. This is change. Things are going to happen that way. This is, we might call it suffering, we might call it dissatisfaction, we may call it those kinds of things that whatever it is, it's not what we had in mind. So we got thrown a curve, and anytime that we have this idea about the way things should be, we get ourselves into trouble, because rarely does it happen that way. You know, right now we're projecting, you know, how things are going to be even when you leave here, or what you're going to do over the weekend, or, you know, all these kinds of things. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But the idea here of this impermanence and the continual change, flux in our health, in our situation, that's what I mean by correct or realistic view. So we're not attached to a particular outcome. We have to be present and accommodating to the world, and not have our wants and needs supersede reality. If you're fighting with reality, reality's going to win. So good that you have that attitude of gratitude. That's a natural kind of thing. We're so fortunate. I often say, you know, we live like kings and queens in this. For us, if you've traveled, you see the rest of the world and the suffering that goes there, and the lifestyles that, I mean, we have beautiful places to live, we have automobiles, we have food, we have, you know, the list goes on. And we are so fortunate, but rarely do we kind of have the gratitude about that. It's, you know, our happiness is, they say he's happiest whose needs are least. You know, we can have everything, but we want more. And the more we want, the more dissatisfaction there is. If we can be satisfied, if we can have gratitude, if we can have contentment, and we have so much, you know, to be thankful for, that goes a long way to our aspiration for more, and our greed, and our idea of attachment. So the idea of, you know, as you say, Lloyd, this is important to understand the role of the spiritual friend in our teaching and the Dharma. So if we go back to the Dharma and we see that, you know, our the way we've done things has been has led us to maybe some suffering, wrong understanding, wrong view, and then we cultivate the virtue, we cultivate the discipline, we cultivate the motivation, the joyful attitude of practice. That continually, we're grooving positive action and letting go of our negative action. So these negative attitudes that we've had, I often use the idea of a record. For those of you who still know what a record is, those grooves that the needle follows, and we've really kind of got those pretty deep. And we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we expect a different result. As I say, that is the definition of insanity, but we keep doing it. So we have to change those ideas, those behaviors, and the Buddha gave us an example. The spiritual friend helps to make those known, helps you cultivate those, and helps you to move in the right direction towards your spiritual development.
I'm just having a hard time finding what you call the Buddha nature in everybody.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I'm creating my own suffering because I have aversion to, for how badly people treat each other. And it's hard for me to ignore that. And because of that, it creates suffering for myself. And it's hard for me to find the Buddha nature. So, in particular, if I look at what's going on in the world, so I've been trying to send out prayers and love to these images, hoping that maybe a crack of it will get through. But I don't know how not to react to it.
With loving kindness and compassion, because those individuals who are exerting their effort in that direction are creating tremendous karma for themselves. So we have compassion, again, as we say, both for the perpetrator and for those who are victims of wrong action. So know that those people who do that, it is based on their own illness, their own psychosis, their own wrong understanding. So when you're sending out those prayers, your prayer is that may they establish loving kindness and compassion, and may they be happy. So it is, your suffering doesn't help that situation. Your understanding, people are not perfected Buddhas at this point. They're working out their own karmic seeds from the past. Unfortunately, they're creating more karmic problems for themselves by the wrong activity. That's where the compassion comes in. You know, you feel like everyone is your mother, and you hate to see them suffer. And you know that that particular action or that particular behavior that you're seeing is out of their own ignorance and their own suffering and their own neurosis. So there's, that should generate loving kindness and compassion. Is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are particular practices we do, Tonglen and other kinds of things, but just wishing the best for those people maybe is the best thing we can do, but your own suffering or judgment or those kinds of things just creates more dissonance in your own mind stream. Okay. So as we progress along the path, we say coming in contact. It can be a teacher that you see online. It can be a book that you're reading. It can be a variety of things, but eventually you will cultivate probably a relationship with a teacher. And be diligent in how you look for that teacher and the qualities of that teacher. The teacher has already made kind of a commitment to help the student, and as the student creates a relationship with the intention, you know, to follow the way of the Buddha and to avoid the karmic suffering for themselves and others, that creates a bond. You know, the teacher has created the aspiration to be a benefit. The student has created the aspiration to follow the path. So that creates this kind of samaya, as it's called, or relationship, or this quality of spiritual development between the teacher and the student. Then we begin with Shine, like we did today. The first aspect of cultivating a stable mind is meditation. And tranquility meditation is the way that it was taught, the way that we have done it here. If you can continue to do that, again, you're disengaging from the cognitive mind and resting more naturally. You're able to see the kind of workings of the mind, the feelings, the emotions, all those things, and bubble up, and disengaging from it. So we're cultivating this Shine. That's the first of the practices. That's the Buddhist word, Shine. You'll hear us say shamatha. That's the Sanskrit word. So Shine, shamatha, tranquility, all the same thing. It's the practice that we did earlier. So this is the foundation practice. This is the ultimate goal of the Shine practice, is this calm abiding or resting in the purity of this moment, without any expectation, without any desire, without any kind of projection. We're moving away from the cognitive mind and resting in the pure, clear aspect of mind. The nature of the mind is pure awareness, clear awareness. Without adulteration, without projection, without overlays of our cognitive mind. It's just awareness. That's the nature of the mind. So the next aspect that after one is stable in their the Shine, shamatha, tranquility meditation, one might consider going to the next step, and that is refuge. You know, taking refuge, as we mentioned, in the Buddha, in the Dharma, in the Sangha. You have come to the realization that this path has benefit, and that taking refuge opens you up to the great ocean of teachings that are available. So, as I was mentioning, Lama Karma is going to come and do the White Tara empowerment, which has to do with purifying, again, our mind, our emotions. It is a healing as well as protecting practice. And more will be said about that, but it is, refuge is required before one takes empowerment. We'll have Lama Karma probably do a refuge ceremony. I did one not too long ago. So for those people who made the decision that indeed they want to continue, it's a catalyst for growth on the path. When one comes to the conclusion that yes, this path has meaning, it is a skillful method to attain the state of perfect awareness of a Buddha, and I make that commitment. And there's a particular ceremony that goes with that. New name is given, and that's the first kind of entering the path in a formal way. And at that point, you are open to taking these empowerments or really engage wholeheartedly on the path. But these precepts and vows must be taken seriously. So again, we take refuge in the Buddha, and there are certain things that are asked for, that you respect the images of the Buddha, either in a rupa or a statue form or a picture or those kinds of things. You don't lay them on the ground. You don't you treat them with respect. And the teachings, the Dharma, again, the prayers or teachings are, we have these puja tables, or they're not put on the ground, you don't step over them, you respect them. And the Sangha, those particular word robes, we respect, and because they transmit the Dharma. And the greatest generosity is the transmission of Dharma, so we respect that. So we take our refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Noble Sangha. So all of this ultimately is about cultivating bodhicitta, loving kindness and compassion. And the Bodhisattva, Chenrezig, here four-armed Chenrezig, is the embodiment of loving kindness and compassion of all the Buddhas. And the 16th, the predecessor, the Karmapa before the 17th, asked that all of the centers do Chenrezig practice. And he thought this was the most appropriate for our culture and for this time, to untie the knots around our heart and to begin to practice this loving kindness and compassion practice, and visualizing ourselves as the great Bodhisattva Chenrezig. So we do this with the intention of developing our compassion. First, for ourselves, we have to have this idea here, and for others, breaking down the barriers of our ego-generated prejudices, and it makes it easier to accept ourselves and others and to work for their benefit as we cultivate this loving kindness and compassion. These are known as practices that engender bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta. This is the essence of the bodhisattvas, to cultivate bodhicitta. So you can see we're kind of progressing along the way. We begin with stabilizing the mind with Shinei. We continue with taking refuge. We can go on with doing the empowerments such as these Yeno practices. We begin doing cultivating our bodhicitta, loving kindness and compassion. One might next take Bodhisattva vows, which is again a formal practice to take the vow that I will not attain Buddhahood until all beings attain Buddhahood, and I work for all of them equally in that by cultivating what are called the 6 perfections. And this is how all bodhisattvas attain enlightenment. So there are different gradations, there are different levels of bodhisattvas, their realization until full enlightenment and Buddhahood are attained. And that's through generosity, the idea of giving freely what's needed. And as I mentioned, the greatest generosity is that of Dharma. So cultivating Dharma, being able to practice Dharma with others who are suffering. There are books just on perfection of generosity. Then patience. The antidote to anger is patience. Just being in the moment, without expectation, patience. Ethics, we have to have some moral compass. You can't be enlightened if your ethics and moral integrity is compromised. So, upright ethics, morality is the path of Bodhisattva. Diligence, a joyful effort is also important. So we are continually striving. Every opportunity that comes our way is an opportunity to practice. And meditation, so cultivating meditation is the vehicle for the last of the six, which is wisdom. So these are the six practices of a bodhisattva, known as the six paramitas or six perfections: generosity, patience, ethics, diligence, meditation, and wisdom.